Hello, my Star Wars family, and welcome back to episode 3 of the High Republic Breakdown series. I know it's been a couple months since our last episode, so thank you ever so much for your patience, but we're here now ready to dive in. As mentioned before, this is episode 3 of the High Republic Breakdown series, the series where I break down entire High Republic stories into digestible bites, so that way you can follow along with the entire story without reading anything at all. And if you're new to the channel or new to the series, feel free to check out episode 1 and 2 in the dedicated playlist. And if you're already subscribed and caught up, welcome back. In today's episode, we're still in phase 2 of the High Republic, covering the Battle of Jedah this time, which is actually an audio drama by George Mann, which was first performed with a full cast, then later published as a script. Like the previous book, this is still set around 382 BBY and roughly around 150 years before phase 1 of the High Republic and over 350 years before the Phantom Menace. And without further ado, now let's jump into the Battle of Jedah. So the story opens on the second spire with a peace summit about to formalize an end to the Irem and Arona war. The mediator Tilson Graff is nervous because the tensions between Irem and Arona's factions are boiling over, and the ambassadors are becoming impatient for a peace resolution, but the negotiations are completely stalled. And on the outside, the crowd's unrest escalates into a riot, pushing the city toward chaos. A guardian warns the Jedi that civilians are swarming the building, then a speeder bike crashes through the window, an early sign that Jedah's neutral ground is about to become weaponized. 72 hours before the battle begins, the Jedi leaders on site reflect on how wrong it feels to see military transports over Jedah even for a peace treaty. They communicate with Galen Attai, who warns them that peace processes attract sabotage, and unknown forces previously had tried to keep the war going. Now, in parallel, Salandra Sho arrives on Jedah and meets both local guardians and Tilson Graff. Jedah's religious pluralism is foregrounded. The enlightened Tapar introduces Keith Sarapass, an anxious Church of the Forest adjacent, while market scenes show Path of the Open Hand protesters chanting about freeing the forest from, quote, manipulation. As part of Path of the Open Hand, we see Martero escort Littles, which are orphans indoctrinated into seeing the Jedi as Force manipulators. We also see Martero interacting with the Mother and the Herald, foreshadowing the sectarian conflict that will erupt. The atmosphere becomes socially brittle. A formal reception party shows diplomacy as performance, and the peace process hinges on a chosen mediator and ambassadors who visibly embody their planet's trauma. Jedi Knight Creighton's son, which is a part of the peace delegation, senses danger. Then a suspicious droid with thrusters delivers a deadly payload. And the second spire erupts with a lethal explosion. In the immediate aftermath, the second spire collapses into fire and rubble. The Jedi Guardians, led by Creighton, attempts a rescue mission. Morton Santeca, who is a part of the influential Santeca family, who was also key to local alliances, is actually found dead. Keith, an archivist affiliated with Church of the Force, realizes his own droid is missing, suggesting the bomb was delivered by the source he trusted the most. So the political consequences are immediate. The ambassadors retreat into orbit, suspicion hardens, and the peace process begins to fracture under the fear that the other side orchestrated the attack. Meanwhile, Marta interprets the explosion as balance or judgment, and then mobilizes the Pass Almhouse, their central refuge. As a humanitarian response, she positions her sect as the visible helpers here, while the Jedi become increasingly linked to the catastrophe. A second axis conflict emerges within the Path itself. The Herald, a rising figure who delivers his sect's messages, reports a failure in locating the Rod of Daybreak, an artifact whose significance is still veiled. His failure provokes a harsh rebuke from the Mother, exposing ambition and tension beneath their seemingly ununified front. Chancellor Greyhawk's representative Surox becomes a target when an explosive device is planted in her quarters, surviving only thanks to Creighton's son's intervention. At the same time, Senator Tintuk's shuttle is bombed mid-operation. These attacks make it clear this is no longer an isolated incident, but a deliberate effort to destabilize the peace process from multiple angles. Then, a seemingly small market incident quickly escalates into something far more dangerous. One of the Littles, which releases a group of caged Wargorans, which are force-sensitive predators, into a crowded area. The creatures lash out, mauling civilians and triggering widespread panic. As the chaos unfolds, the Path steps in to contain the situation, capturing the beast and restoring order. The public responds with praise, reinforcing a critical theme: the perception matters here. Those who appear to be the rescuers can gain trust and influence, even if they played a role in creating the crisis itself. Tension between the various Force sects and the Convocation reaches a breaking point. The Herald petitions the Convocation as an attempt to assert the Path's influence, but instead of easing divisions, the events of the day actually only accelerate the city toward chaos. A riot erupts in the central square as fear and mistrust spread amongst the gathered factions. weapons. In the midst of the disorder, a far more terrifying threat is unleashed: the Leveler. This creature doesn't simply attack physically, it disrupts the Force itself, severing or suppressing a user's connection. Force-sensitive individuals begin to collapse, their abilities stripped away as they wither into lifeless husks, or even in some cases turn to dust. Jedi Knight Solandra, who senses the same unnatural wrongfulness she previously felt within the presence of the Mother, drawing a chilling connection between the path of the open hand and the horror now unfolding. At 0 hour, the peace process is meant to restart, but instead it becomes a calculated reenactment of catastrophe. The riot surges toward the second spire, and while surviving the first bombing of a shuttle, Senator Tintak is assassinated by a figure on a speeder bike. An Irono guard claims the assassin wore an IREM uniform, sparking immediate blame. A firefight erupts and both militaries deploy into the Holy City from orbit, transforming the riot into a full-scale battle. As the situation spirals, Creighton's son and Jedi Knight Ada Forte attempt to extract Syrox from the growing conflict. But Syrox makes a critical decision. Rather than retreat, she authorizes IREM forces to fully deploy in response to Irono's presence. In doing so, she effectively legitimizes the conflict, turning what was chaos into an official sanctioned battle between two governments. And at the same time, Creighton faces his own moral dilemma. Despite the escalating violence, he refuses to use the Force to manipulate or control the rioting crowds. His restraint reflects the core Jedi principles: respect for free will and non-coercion, even if that choice limits his ability to quickly stabilize the situation. In a moment where decisive action could shift the tide, Creighton chooses ethics over expediency, highlighting the growing tension between the Jedi ideals and the harsh realities unfolding on Jeddah. After recovering from the chaos, Jedi Knight Solandra begins piecing together what actually happened. Working alongside Keth, she accesses recorded data tied to the earlier bombings. A disciple of the Brotherhood of the Ninth Door was seen interacting directly with the droid used in the attack. The Brotherhood, known for their ability to obscure and manipulate perception, provides the missing link, explaining why eyewitness accounts of the attacker have been so inconsistent and contradictory. This discovery reframes the entire conflict. It's not just violence or coincidence, perception itself has been weaponized. The chaos, the blame, and of course the confusion between IREM and Irono has all been deliberately engineered, making it nearly impossible to distinguish the truth from manipulation. And at the same time, another layer of conflict comes into focus. Tilson Graff, the appointed mediator meant to guide the peace process, is actually revealed to be acting in his own self-interest. And behind the scenes, he is shown bargaining with the Brother of the Ninth Door, seeking both protection and greater influence as the situation on Jeddah deteriorates. Graff pushes them to escalate the chaos further, encouraging targeted assassinations of the Jedi and the use of their perception-altering abilities to deepen confusion and misdirect blame. Rather than stabilizing the situation, he actively contributes to its unraveling. As the battle intensifies, the conflict fractures into multiple simultaneous fronts across the city. Jedi Knight Ada Forte and the Guardians engage Irono's heavy mining loaders, massive industrial machines repurposed for combat, using their narrow streets of Jeddah to their advantage. By coordinating their movements and limiting the loader's mobility, they were able to hold their ground despite being outmatched in raw power. Elsewhere, Creighton's son and his ally Misuk took to the rooftops, confronting IREM's enforcer droids from above. The fight becomes increasingly chaotic, with explosions tearing through nearby structures and dogfights erupting in the skies overhead as both sides deploy their aerial support. Amid the confusion, Syrox escalates the situation even further. Abandoning any remaining restraint, she orders enforcer droids to execute Jedi on sight. It's a decisive shift from negotiation to annihilation, demonstrating how quickly diplomacy collapses into uncompromising military action once fear and panic take hold. As the battle spreads, Solandra and Keth shift their focus to protecting civilians, guiding the survivors toward the Dome of Deliverance, which is a sanctuary meant to offer refuge from the violence consuming the city. For a moment, it represents hope and safety, but that illusion is quickly shattered. The Brotherhood of the Ninth Door infiltrate the dome itself, turning even this place of refuge into a battlefield. Solandra is forced into direct combat, dueling and ultimately killing the attacker to protect those inside. In the aftermath, one of the Brotherhood agents, Maishan, reveals a critical piece of the puzzle. Using mimicry and perception-based manipulation, Maishan exposed that Tilson Graff played a direct role in orchestrating the elements of the bombing and its precise timing. This revelation ultimately cuts through the chaos. What's happening on Jeddah isn't simply a result of ancient tension or unavoidable conflict, it's really been deliberately shaped. The war is really not inevitable history unfolding, but really an outcome of calculated choices, manipulation, and of course ambition. The cost of battle becomes deeply personal and irreversible. As the confrontation reaches its peak, Maishran turns to Salandra, forcing a final desperate struggle. In that moment, Keth steps in. Despite not being a warrior, he acts without hesitation, stabbing Maishran to protect her. But the act comes at a devastating price. Keth is fatally wounded during the exchange. In his final moments, the focus shifts away from the chaos of war to something more intimate, his real connection with Salandra. Their last exchange emphasizes friendship, trust, and the quiet meaning he found in standing beside the Jedi even without wielding the Force himself. Keth's death leaves a lasting mark on Salandra. In the aftermath, she adopts a vow-like resolve, not just as a Jedi, but as a protector. She commits herself to becoming a shield for others, determining that if she can prevent it, no one else will suffer the same fate. A powerful symbol of the city's identity falls alongside its people. The Great Protector statue, long seen as a representation of unity, guidance, and spiritual strength on Jedah, collapses amid the destruction. As it crashes into the streets below, it doesn't just cause physical damage, it shatters the morale, signaling to those still fighting and fleeing that the city itself is losing its foundation. Almost immediately after, the loss becomes personal once again. Misuk, fighting alongside Creighton, is overwhelmed and killed by advancing droids. His death hits hard, another ally lost in rapid succession, reinforcing just how unforgiving battle has become. For Creighton, this moment is a breaking point. Grief, exhaustion, and responsibility converge, leaving him emotionally raw. But instead of retreating, it sharpens his resolve. With the violence spiraling toward an even greater catastrophe in the central square, Creighton becomes more determined than ever to stop the massacre before it even claims more lives. As the battle reaches its peak and the city collapses into chaos, Tilson Graff abandons any remaining pretense of leadership and attempts to flee. Desperate to survive, he turns to the mother of the Path of the Open Hand, claiming that they are partners, arguing that they both played a role in shaping the events unfolding on Jedah and they should escape together. But the mother rejects that idea entirely. In a cold, decisive act, she shoots Graff, eliminating him without hesitation. Her response makes one thing abundantly clear: there is no true alliances within the Path, only control. Graff truly believed he was a part of something larger, but to the mother, he was just simply a tool that outlived its usefulness. This moment reveals the Path's ruthless internal logic. More importantly, it underscores the mother's determination to control not just the outcome of the conflict, but the narrative itself, ensuring that what happened on Jedah is remembered in the way that serves her vision and hers alone. The conflict reaches its climax in the central square, with Ivram and Irono's troops locked in a final standoff, both sides preparing to unleash a devastating firepower. Troops from both sides, weapons drawn, with orders to fire, seconds away from turning the confrontation into an all-out massacre that would permanently define the war. At that critical moment, Jedi reinforcements arrive alongside Republic peacekeepers, inserting themselves directly in between the opposing forces. Rather than escalating the fight, the Jedi take a different approach. Using the Force in unison, they hold incoming blaster fire suspended in midair, physically stopping the violence before it can erupt even further and forcing both sides into a moment of stillness. That pause creates space for something even more powerful than combat. Creighton's son steps forward and delivers a final appeal, not demanding surrender, but reframing the entire conflict. He argues that peace isn't about forgetting what's been done, but refusing to let vengeance, fear, and those who profit from division dictate the future. His words cut through the chaos, challenging both sides to recognize what they're about to become. Slowly, that message begins to take hold. Despite standing orders, the soldiers from both Iram and Irono start lowering their weapons. One by one, that moment of war breaks, not through force, but through choice. In the end, the immediate battle doesn't conclude with a treaty or formal agreement, but through a combination of Jedi intervention and moral persuasion. It's a fragile resolution, but a powerful one, showing that even at the height of destruction, a cycle of violence can still be interrupted. In the aftermath of the battle, as the violence subsides and the city begins to reckon with what exactly just happened, Salandra complies and delivers the evidence she just uncovered. Her findings point directly toward Tilson Graff and the Brotherhood of the Ninth Door, exposing their roles in manipulating the events and escalating the conflict. But any hope of formal justice is cut short. With Graff dead, there is no one left to publicly answer for the full scope of the conspiracy, leaving much of the truth fragmented and unresolved. Salandra remains deeply wary of the Path of the Open Hand. Despite their public image as healers and protectors during this crisis, she recognizes their deeper involvement, particularly in enticing unrest and their connection to the Leveler. But to her, the danger really hasn't ended, it just simply changed forms. On a more personal level, Solandra fulfills a final quiet duty. She returns Keth's body to the Temple of Kyber, ensuring he's honored properly. In doing so, she reflects on who he was, not a warrior or a Jedi, but someone whose compassion and courage proved invaluable. Keth is remembered not for power, but his willingness to act when it mattered the most, someone who meant far more than he ever believed. We now get to the epilogue. The epilogue shifts focus beyond the immediate aftermath, pointing toward a larger consequence still unfolding. On Coruscant, the Jedi begin to realize that what has happened on Jedah was not an isolated incident, but part of a much broader destabilization. Communications across the regions are disrupted, and tensions between Irem and Erono remain fragile, suggesting that the conflict may reignite despite the temporary halt in violence. Within the Jedi Order, there's a growing awareness that they are facing a threat that's not purely physical, but systemic. One manipulates perception, fuels vision, and operates beyond traditional lines of battle. Back on Jedah, the tone shifts to something more reflective. Solandra returns to Enlightenment, where she recounts Keth's story, ensuring that his actions, sacrifice, and his meaning are not lost in the larger narrative of war. In doing so, she reinforces a powerful idea: when truth is distorted and events are manipulated, memory becomes a form of resistance. And that wraps up the Battle of Jedah. I really appreciate you sticking around with me. Honestly, these breakdowns take quite a bit of time. Taking a 5-hour book like this, or a 18-hour book like Trials of the Jedi, and condensing it to around 15 to 20 minutes is no small feat. So if you enjoyed this, feel free to like and subscribe. That would truly mean the world, not only to show that you like this kind of content, but help support a smaller Star Wars channel like mine. Again, really thank you, and I can't wait to dive into the next one with you as well. The next book we are going to be covering is Cataclysm by Lydia Kang, and I will catch you all on the next video. Again, thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you, and take care.